educational settings, there's a certain, this is a process you go through to solve this type of problem. And, if you learn that process, you will get a good grade, and then you'll go on and be able to do all these other things. To me, that's fairly, in some sense, by the time it's that proceduralized, it will be automated in time. And the thing that's most interesting to do as a human is things that are more kind of judgment-oriented and more kind of involved with thinking. I mean, I think that, this question of how do you teach people to think? Interesting question. It is not the problem that is being solved by most of education. And the machinery of education is not particularly well set up for that, because it's quite industrial with lots of people going through it and lots of kinds of assessment mechanisms and so on.
Very standardized in a way.
Right. But I mean, but then from the point of view of the student, it's kind of up to you to kind of learn to think, so to speak. I don't think there are situations that can be more helpful than less. I mean, I like to believe that some of the educational stuff we do with summer school, summer camp, some things that I do myself and so on, are helpful in this regard, particularly so here's a point people don't realize, perhaps, a couple of points. I mean, one point is, you're given a question. Okay, if you know a bunch of stuff, you will be able to engage somehow to think about that question, even though there is, the answer is not in the back of the book. There isn't a book, but actually almost any question you can think about. And one of the things I've noticed, and it's true very much with people in sort of work setting, is do people keep the thinking apparatus engaged when they are presented with different kinds of things to do? People find that surprisingly difficult often. There are people who manage to do it, and that's great. And there are people where it's like, well, how does it fit into this class that I took? How does it fit into whatever? Well, actually, you really do know how to think more broadly, but for some reason, you disengage the thinking apparatus. So, for example, one place where one sees that quite a bit is, let's say academics going into business, okay, where they're pretty analytical and smart and they figure out lots of things. And then they're presented with some situation with people, business, organization, and so on. And the thinking apparatus disengages. It's like, look, you've got this problem. You know how to think analytically about things. You can figure it out. But it's like they don't understand that they can take the kind of the thinking that they know how to do in some technical field and apply the same underlying processes in some sense to something completely different. Another thing that I notice with students, okay, a pet peeve, right? So students will study this in class A, okay? Then you got sort of thing you're talking to them about, whatever. And it's like, you say, well, do you know anything about this? Well, yes, I took a class about this. Okay, well, so you can apply a bunch of the ideas from that field or whatever it is to this thing that's come up. Oh, they say, I didn't think of that. And often they really find it very difficult to take, even though they spent a year studying whatever it is. It's like, look, leverage what you learned there, relate it to what you now have to think about. This is it's a thing one can do, so to speak. But people find that really difficult. And even the transference from one class, I learned about this in this class. I mean, it's something, because people use Mathematica, Wolfram Alpha, Wolfram Language, and so on a bunch in courses in college, etc. One of the things that shocked me, okay, this is now 33 years ago, okay, first people were doing calculus with Mathematica back in the day. So I said, we're going to have this get together for the students who are in this very first class doing this. So I'm talking to these students. I say, what are you majoring? What are you doing? Civil engineering, whatever it is. So I'm like, oh, that's good, because you just learned all this methodology and all these computational tools that you can now use for civil engineering. Person looks at me completely blankly, like, really? Why? that doesn't compute, so to speak. That's a pity. And that's something where, figuring out how you take the thing you learned here and apply it there is very good exercise for people because, in a sense, these classes are very siloed. Like, Professor A is not going to say, did you learn this in Professor B's class? They're just doing, the thing that Professor A is supposed to be teaching typically. And sometimes there are sequences of classes. But, I think that's that's another feature. I think I had a different point I was going to make about sort of